All right, we'll give a quick synopsis here of the proceedings on turn one. The first turn takes a long time to work through in all the NextWar series games, but I think it's probably more so in this one because you really only got one shot to make a good first impression when it comes to invading this island. All right, you only really got one shot to pick where am I going to land, what's my strategy going to be. So that the opening turn is big decisions for the People's Republic of China. Now, if you didn't watch the first video, I'm really kit bashing this thing because I've got parts from NextWar Vietnam, NextWar Taiwan, of course, also supplement number 2, and blending a number of things together so as to bring the order of battle as up to date as possible. But the original rules for Taiwan, they weren't as complete as like what you get with Vietnam is so much more complete in terms of what to expect in the scenarios. I don't know, it just feels like it's a tighter game. So I'm really looking forward to when this gets, the second printing, they'll bring it up to the same caliber as NextWar Vietnam, answering a lot of the questions that were left unanswered in NextWar Taiwan. So air and naval plays a big part in the game because you got to maintain control of the straits of Taiwan if you want to be able to survive. So in the air superiority battle, the outcome of that was pretty heavily in the Chi-Com favor. So the People's Republic of China had a 5-1 superiority, so they got air supremacy on turn 1. That's not unexpected for them to achieve. So the AWACS advantage moves 1 marker over, and so they are able to get off to a good start. Special Forces teams wreaked a little bit of havoc on the island defenses, but not as bad as it could have been. The die rolls were not all that great. I forgot to rotate this guy. They weren't all that great. The counterattack, I was reluctant because there's not Chinese units on the board just yet. I was reluctant to expend the Allied Special Forces team, so I did send in some U.S. units to get a targeting attempt on one of the S-300 batteries. I was hoping to take down one of the batteries. If I got lucky with the B-2 strike, with it targeted, I could get a level 2 strike on it and then maybe go for the throat and try to take it out with one of the other bombers. But a little bit of a long shot. I decided to take a stab at it and didn't quite do as successfully as I wanted to. Chinese end up getting control of the air. On sea, their naval forces come and put a strong force ashore in these 2 hexes, braving the minefields. They leave one of their carrier battle groups just offshore. And this is not an official rule. This is my own rule, but it really should be a rule in the game, and that is basically to treat these battle groups as having a SAM umbrella that cannot pass into the rough of the mountain, okay, but it can go into the flat terrain, or I should say highland and mountain. It should block it, but rough. It'll go into the coastal strip. That's something that's absolutely necessary. I think without that, the Chinese are going to get bottled up on the shore, and a turn or two in, they're not going to be able to exploit the breakthrough as much as they ought to be able to do so. Furthermore, realistically, those ships should be able to provide some sort of air detection capability. Under the rules as written, the air defense track here isn't really going to apply to any Chinese lodgement on the island here. It's only going to apply, I think, to the mainland. And unless it's clarified or something, that's the case as far as I understand it. So until they can bring one of the S-3 batteries over to the mainland, they're going to need their fleet to provide some kind of a SAM umbrella. So I left the 1 battle group there for that purpose. Patriot battery, located here with this HQ, was very, very successful at making it hard for the Chinese aircraft to support their landing. But as you can see on the map, the landing was successful. They occupied a bunch of towns around Tainan. I didn't want to get bottled up in trying to do too much, but I did want to take the port and the airfield, and this they succeeded in doing. And so that's going to make it easy for them to bring some of the units back over from the mainland. So good turn of events there. This was probably stupid. But it's worked out so far. I took the port just outside of the plastic plant, and having that port means I can bring in extra units and try to bring some supply in there. They're going to be out of supply, I think, this next turn, unless I can get an MSU in there. But the idea was to try to provide a second outlet, second port quickly in the game, besides just the beachhead and the Tainan port. A couple land battles took place around here. The elite Marines, Taiwanese Marines, were defeated, but the airborne troops they took some losses as well. So it was pretty heavy fighting, and the Taiwanese gave it as good as they got. Let's put it that way. Oops, forgot to rotate this guy. Over here, there wasn't really any battles that took place. No real combat took place. The Taiwanese defenders from that corps moved up, and they're moving slowly because I'm playing with the refugee rules from NextWar Vietnam. I think that would definitely apply in this situation, so I am using that rule. And so that slows up movement on turn 1 and turn 2 especially. So they basically are just trying to bottle up the landing there. Try not to get distracted with trying to take Penghu. I figure we can go back and take that later, but let's get as many guys ashore, supply, get that onshore as quickly as possible, and then let's let this take care of itself. There was some battles that took place over here. I'm going to just adjust my lighting a little bit. Over here in the Ryukyus, the American Carrier Battle Group and a SAG, Surface Action Group, went into the Ryukyus area, and they were successful in getting into this area. However, there's a point detection rolled on the SAG, and so the SAG was attacked with cruise missile strikes from the mainland, and actually not from the mainland, because this is another very ambiguous rule. It's not clarified in Taiwan, so this is my own rule. Basically, I'm making up my own rules, because the rulebook doesn't really address how this works in enough detail to play. So how I work it is that land-based cruise missiles can be launched into any of the sea zones adjacent to the mainland. Anything beyond that is going to require the use of one of their heavy bombers. The H-8 bombers. That's the only way you're going to launch cruise missiles. Now, there's these little icons that indicate that if this is controlled by Japan, they can do cruise missile strikes in these locations, but it's super ambiguous as to, well, where are those missiles actually being, what are the launch platforms for those missiles? This is a rule that really needs to get tightened up. The way I'm playing it is that you can launch those from naval vessels, but I'm not educated enough on the range of Chinese cruise missiles launched from their ships. So I'm going to assume that they can launch it from their ships if they're in the same sea zone, and anything beyond that, you're going to have to use a bomber, put a bomber into that sea zone, and then use your cruise missiles. Basically, you're using it as a launch platform. So that flight ends up getting flown. It can't really be intercepted or anything like that, but you got to use it for that purpose. That's how I'm playing. Anyhow, they did take a cruise missile strike on the SAG and forced them to retreat, put a strike marker on them, and so they retreated so they'd be in a position to get that off of the, they retreated back to port so as to remove the strike marker. There was some cruise missile strikes. Actually, let me go back over here. There was some cruise missile strikes on the Chinese battle group, carrier battle group, and they were also forced to retreat and get back to base in order to remove that. There's point detections in the inshore box on this group, but this group's undetected here. Another unit that was forced out back into port was the Taiwanese SAG. They were forced back into port. There's missile shots taking place off the beachhead, and more missile shots being taken between these two groups here, but no damage being inflicted. So that is a synopsis of the first turn. I'm happy, as Taiwan, I'm happy that I'm able to, I think, control the expansion of the battlefield. I feel like we can contain this, and this invasion can still be defeated. As China, I'm happy that I got guys ashore. I'm unhappy with how this developed. This was probably a stupid mistake. But they can probably fight their way out of that because these two beachheads are going to get linked up pretty quick. So if we can bring in an MSU and then bring in as many of these guys from the mainland as possible, this little problem over here can be solved. But it's going to take away from the main effort, which is to move into Kaohsiung and all these rich, vital urban hexes and the ports associated with them. So lots of points were scored turn one. The Taiwanese ended up getting a couple of points out of shooting down some fighters. They got 2 points this turn from shooting down some Chinese aircraft, and I think that was with the F-22s, by the way. The Chinese, where's their marker? Here it is. They got 19 points in this turn, so it was a very good opening turn for them. And so we'll add those up at the end of, or at the beginning of next turn. We'll get that all sorted out. These markers will go down to 0, and the VP markers will go up respectively. So there's no chance of auto victory just yet. This guy should be done. No chance of auto victory, of course, on turn one. And that's basically the score at present. No reinforcements for the Allies, but I think they're going to get some ships next turn. That's going to affect things. My goal is to put the Allies into position to start controlling waters leading up to the Taiwan Straits. We're really not in a position to contest air superiority in the way that I would like. They did transfer some A-10s and some Wild Weasel flights to Okinawa. That's what this is. This is Okinawa. It's not the Philippines. And so they will be in position to support the battle taking place on the mainland. But as far as, I mean, that's pretty much all that they've been able to do. They'll be able to bring over some more A-10s over here. But as long as the Chinese do have control of the air, use of those is going to be somewhat problematic. So the Chinese naval fleet basically is acting in a shuttle capacity right now. But I'm probably going to have to park some of those CVs off the shore in order to provide the best possible radar and SAM coverage until we can get some S-3 batteries from the mainland onto the battlefield itself. Once those S-300 batteries get on the island, it's going to be really, really tough sledding for Allied air power. One last thing about the air battle. The Taiwanese Air Force actually survived remarkably well. There was very little collateral damage for either side. There was airfields hit in the mainland from missile strikes, but they didn't really, the collateral damage rolls were terrible for both sides. So not a whole lot of aircraft losses like I have seen in other games of NextWar Taiwan. So it's strange game so far in that respect. Oh, one other rule that I'm playing with, making up as on my own, is the rulebooks say nothing about aircraft replacements, like what aircraft can get replaced isn't really covered. So I'm using the NextWar Vietnam rules to basically determine which of the Chinese and which of the U.S. air units can be replaced. And then I'm assuming that these old model Taiwanese fighters, I'm assuming that they have spare parts enough on the island to do replacements. Your limitation on that, of course, is supply points. That they don't have a lot of. So I kind of think that that's going to balance things out. I anticipate that the Taiwanese Air Force is going to cease to exist. It's happening slower than in the past because this is the first time I played the game where the U.S. has intervened at this level this early. And so that is shielding these guys from getting absolutely crushed. But they have an awful lot of missile points left to spend. Didn't spend a whole lot on the first turn, and we'll have to see how that develops as the game goes on. So that's the end of the first round. 2 days worth of coverage here, NextWar Taiwan by GMT Games. Again, this is a scenario. I'm just doing it myself, making things up as I go along, and having some fun while we do it. So there you go. We'll bring the next video once we get through another day's action.